There are no spoilers, no clues, and absolutely nothing. Yeah, that's basically the situation for this month because, Chapter 37 has been delayed for a month and will be released in September. But at least that's not going to stop me. I mean, it's not going to stop us from talking about and discussing this manga. And honestly, the point we're going to talk about over the next few minutes, I don't think this is just some random glimpse of the future. There are actually a lot of question marks surrounding it. Yeah, that's just how it is. So, in one of the panels from the previous chapter, there's this small detail in one of the possible futures that Kashin Koji saw, and I think it might actually be hiding something way bigger than it seems. I don't know if bigger is the right word for it, but at the very least, it's definitely not as simple as I mentioned earlier. We already know that Kashin Koji's prescience allows him to see all kinds of possible futures, and out of all the future glimpses we've been shown, there's one image that you could easily miss. In it, we can see Jura, one of the strongest and most ridiculously powerful Shinju in Konoha. I mean, he's literally there with Shikamaru. At first, the image isn't really that clear. Even their positions are partially covered by some of the other panels. But if you look a little closer, Jura seems to be holding a glass. And honestly, so far we don't have any clues or hints, and we literally don't know what's inside that glass, right? And again, like I said earlier, maybe this is minor and not that important, but I don't think Ikamoto set up that scenario by accident. And even though the manga hasn't given us any explanation about this scene yet, it's because there's no explanation that one huge question comes up. Why are Jura and Shikamaru in the same place in one of the possible futures? Is this just a regular scene with no real significance, or could this actually be a hint that the future Kashin Koji saw is way different from what we've been imagining all along? But honestly, it's still really interesting. First, we gotta understand why this scene is so interesting. Jura isn't your average character. He's a divine tree human, or a Shinju with his own consciousness and goal. Ever since he first appeared, Jura has shown that he's different from previous enemies. He's not just a creature driven purely by instinct. Jura can think, analyze humans, and even show curiosity about the world beyond himself. This is important because if Jura keeps evolving like this, it's totally possible that at some point he'll start understanding humans in a much more complex way. And that's where Shikamaru's presence gets interesting. Shikamaru himself is one of the most likely characters to get involved in negotiations or strategies against the Shinju. He's not the type of character who just blindly attacks something without understanding the situation first. And I don't think we need to doubt or debate that at all, right? If there's a threat that can't be defeated by raw power, Shikamaru will most likely try to figure out how the enemy works, what their goal is, and whether there's still a chance to communicate. So if Jura and Shikamaru are seen together in the future, chances are they aren't fighting. They might be doing something way weirder, talking. And if that's the case, let's reframe the question. It's no longer why is Jura with Shikamaru, or what are they doing, but rather, what made Jura willing to talk to Shikamaru? And did his intuition tell him that Shikamaru isn't a dangerous threat? Yeah, simply put, Jura probably wouldn't act aggressively unless someone provokes him. And at least a few interesting points are worth considering for analysis and theories. First, Jura already has a different goal compared to the other Shinju. We gotta remember that every Shinju has a different target and personality. Jura himself seems to have a pretty strong curiosity about humans. He's interested in knowledge, life, and even how human minds work. So maybe the longer Jura stays in this world, the more understanding he gets. It could be that he eventually realizes not all humans are enemies, and Shikamaru, being a super rational guy, might be one of the first humans able to communicate with him without immediately trying to destroy him or acting aggressively. The second possibility is way more interesting. What if this scene takes place after a massive conflict between Konoha and the Shinju? Or, in other words, what if there's a second invasion? Because if we look closely again, there are so many scenes where Konoha Jonin and several Tsumeaka are revealed in that future. So I don't think it's impossible for another invasion to happen, right? Imagine if at some point that worst case scenario reaches a state where both sides realize they can't just keep fighting. In a situation like that, some sort of negotiation could pop up, and who makes the most sense to be the negotiator? Shikamaru. Though maybe that last line sounds totally absurd. especially since Koji already confirmed that Jura wouldn't do anything bad like causing destruction in Konoha. But maybe that was a naive or innocent statement, because either way, it's not about being in denial or not. But at the very least, in a future that keeps branching out, there will always be things that turn out differently than before. Going back to the panel about what Jura is holding, could we interpret that symbolically? Again, we don't know what's in that glass. Let's not immediately assume it's just a regular drink or jump to conclusions that Jura is doing something specific. But visually, the scene feels so human. Jura is sitting with someone, holding a glass, and doesn't look like he's attacking anyone, even though he's a creature we've known as a threat this whole time. If Ikemoto really did this intentionally as part of the future vision, then a simple visual like that might be trying to show us something. Jura is starting to adapt to human life, and this brings us to the third theory. What if the Shinju eventually stop being just monsters that need to be defeated? Maybe the evolution of the Shinju will actually become one of the biggest conflicts in Boruto. They aren't just standard villains like the ones we knew from the Naruto franchise. They have individual consciousness. They learn from the humans they target. They acquire memories, personalities, and even desires. If this process continues, what happens when they start developing desires that contradict their original purpose? Jura might be the very first example of this. He has already shown that he has a unique kind of curiosity. So it's totally possible that the future Koji saw shows a world where Jura no longer follows the pattern we currently know. Heck, maybe he even becomes a third party. Not human, but no longer an enemy to humanity either. Yeah, I know that sounds a bit exaggerated and way too early to call, especially since this is still just the beginning, right? And when you throw Kashin Koji into the mix, everything gets even more interesting. Koji himself can't see his own future the same way he sees everyone else's. In the end, he even realizes there's a limit to what he can predict, which means those future fragments we saw don't necessarily mean everything will happen exactly like that. It could just be one of many branching possibilities. A possibility where Jura and Shikamaru meet, a possibility where the relationship between humans and the Shinju changes, a possibility that might not even happen if Boruto makes different decisions. Because even though we know Koji just got a massive buff, yeah, you guys know what I mean, right? There's still one fact we've overlooked so far, and that's his weaknesses and stuff like that, right? Plus, we've already analyzed with proof that there are so many characters with the potential to bend the future itself. And to me, that's where the real value of this image lies. Don't look at the image of Jura and Shikamaru as a simple spoiler like Jura is gonna be friends with Shikamaru or anything like that. Because honestly, that's way too fast and way too early. We don't know yet if they're making peace, negotiating, exchanging info, or even in a completely different situation altogether. The glass might not even be a drink. It could be part of a specific context we don't understand yet. Heck, the scene might even have a totally different context once it's finally shown in the manga. But the one thing we can really question is, why did Ikemoto choose to show Jura in a position like that? Yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. And yep, as a wild hypothesis, maybe the real future being shown to us isn't about who wins the war between Konoha and the Shinju. Maybe the bigger question is what happens when the Shinju start becoming too much like humans. If Jura actually becomes capable of understanding humans one day, has his own desires, and can even communicate with someone like Shikamaru, then the conflict in Boruto will change completely. As a plot twist, would humans still view Jura as an enemy that must be defeated and destroyed? I think if Naruto still has a role in this situation, then nothing is impossible. But on the flip side, behind all of that, we have Kawaki and Boruto, especially Kawaki, who is obsessed with destroying anything related to the Otsutsuki and all that, right? And maybe, just maybe, that's the reason why this tiny scene showed up in the future Kashin Koji saw. Because if all the future vision fragments we saw have a purpose, then the image of Jura with Shikamaru could be one of the clues that Boruto's future won't be as simple as humans versus Shinju. There will be possibilities where the line between enemy and ally gets way more blurry. Of course, this is still just a theory. What Jura is actually doing, or even why Shikamaru is there, remains a mystery. But that's exactly why this scene is so interesting to keep an eye on. So what do you guys think is actually happening in this scene? Is Jura negotiating with Shikamaru? Are they actually working together? Or could this be an ending plot twist none of us saw coming? Yeah, whatever it is, let's discuss it down in the comments. Thanks for watching. I'm Nim without an E. See you in the next video. Bye-bye, Dada Bio.